Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to La Leaf. I am Alexis de la Rocha, and I am the music director of La Leaf Music. And I am completely honored, overjoyed, and excited because today we have a very fun conversation with phenomenal music composers. And they're going to be sharing film composing for TV and film and the push for diversity, because that is what we are all about here at La Leaf, and that is what we are about when it comes to changing the world for the better. So without further ado, I would like each of our beautiful participants to chime in and describe a little bit about your name, yourself, and of course, what you're most proud of and what you love. Maybe we can start off with Dara Taylor.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alexis, for having me. My name is Dara Taylor. I'm a composer for film and television. I've been in the biz for, I guess, about maybe a decade. Most recently, a few things I finished were Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, and then then Michael Shannon thriller, Echo Boomers, and the Netflix children's series called Bookmarks, a celebration of Black voices.
Beautiful, Dara. Now maybe we'll take it to Tony Morales.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Alexis. Happy to be here with you all. My name is Tony Morales, and I'm a composer in film and TV. I've also been in the business for some time now, nearing on 20 years somehow. And some recent projects that I've done for Elena of Avalor for Disney Junior, and The Fugitive reboot for Quibi, which rest in peace, and Bloodline for Netflix, and I did a series called Scorpion on CBS, and happy to be here and chat with you today.
Thank you so much, Tony. All right, now the Colombian powerhouse, Mr. David Murillo, por favor.
Alexis, thank you so much for the invitation. My name is David Murillo R. I'm a Colombian film composer, and latest productions I worked on was Blast Beat, a film that also was created by fellow Colombians, and Netflix's Who Killed Sara.
Wonderful. I love Blast Beat, so we'll talk about that later too. And now, without further ado, tuning in from the beautiful Hawaiian Islands and the breeze of the waves, we have the talented George Shaw.
Hey guys, I'm George Shaw, film and TV composer for about 2 decades, and I wish I could tell you guys, because the thing I'm really excited about is the TV show that I'm working on now, but I can't. But I'm known for my work on Escapes at Night for YouTube originals, and I also, as a filmmaker, wrote and produced a short film called Star Wars Musical that spoofed Star Wars as if it was a Disney musical.
Too cool, George. I want to check that out so bad. All right, now our last speaker, but definitely not the least amount. He is a powerhouse in his own right. It is Jongnic. Please introduce yourself, my friend.
Wow, powerhouse. I don't think I've ever gotten that one before.
Oh, so yeah, my name won't be the first.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Alexis. Wow, way too. Now I got to live up to it. So my name is Jongnic Bontemps. I, like my esteemed colleagues, I am also a film composer. I've been here in the business for about 9 years now, so I guess I'm the most junior. Sorry, Dara, I beat you. And fun fact is that Tony Morales gave me my first job right out of USC, so he's way older than I am.
Oh, whoa! Where's this going?
But yeah, I've been blessed to have worked on various projects across film, TV, and video games. Most recently, I had a film at Sundance this year called My Name is Paulie Murray, which was acquired by Amazon, will be out by the end of the year, as well as a docuseries on CNN, The People vs. the Klan, which is on CNN and Hulu right now. So pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you all so very much. you all have such beautiful, diverse backgrounds and scores and compositions that you're working on. So I'm very excited to dive deeper into that and hear some of your journeys. Now, I know that when it comes to working in music and in the industry, there's always various facets. And so I'm curious to hear, how did you, end up gravitating towards this world of film composing? Is that where you envisioned your career in the beginning? And if not, how did you end up here? I know that even Jongnic, you were saying like, I'm one of the later editions, but I love it. And then some like George, 2 decades. So, if anyone would like to jump into that, I would love to hear how you ended up jumping into film composing. Can start with.
I'll start.
All right.
For me, it really came from, the movies I loved as a kid, a lot of Spielberg movies, and Back to the Future as well. And immediately I was drawn. I remember renting Back to the Future and loving the end credit music so much that I hooked up a tape player to the VCR and recorded the end credit music. And so that's kind of where the love began. And once I discovered John Williams had done a lot of my favorite movies like E.T. and Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, and Schindler's List, and that these scores that I had loved, like I didn't know I had loved them, but they were ingrained in my head after seeing those movies. So really, by the time I was 16, I was already composing and realizing, oh, I would love to do what he does. So I knew very early on that I wanted to be a film composer. So everybody told me, go to USC. That is like the top film scoring program. And so I went there and really started immersing myself with the cinema school, in fact, before I even entered the film scoring program. So I started just working with up and coming student filmmakers. And here I am, 20 years later, making a living doing it. It's wonderful.
Unbelievable. USC representing, huh?
Yeah, I think you'll see the USC is common across a couple of us. But, for me, I actually had no idea that this industry existed. Growing up as a kid, I always played piano. My parents forced me at first to take piano lessons, and then I started playing in bands and writing my own songs throughout high school. And even in college, ran a recording studio and majored in music. But I had no idea how to monetize any of this, because all you saw as a kid was either your music teachers that unfortunately lived at home with their mothers, right? So that wasn't a life that I wasn't about. Or two was a gigging musician, that was always on the road. And, coming from the neighborhoods that I came from, which, I'm not from the hood, I'm not from a poor, neighborhood. I was from a very middle class neighborhood, but it was very diverse. There weren't a lot of information about what you could do with music. So it was never on my radar. I was like, I'm just going to go and make some money. And I ended up being in software after I graduated from college. And I spent 15 years doing software development in New York City and eventually Silicon Valley. But when my startup that I was an early member of was bought by HP, I was like, well, do I really want to stay with HP? Not really. Do I really want to go to another startup? Not really. So music started to make a comeback. And eventually, after several years of sort of self-study and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it, film composing came out. I was like, came up as in a conversation with somebody. I was like, that's actually a job? Wait, people actually get paid to write music for film and TV? Hold on a second. I think I can do that. And then this entire journey started, which culminated in going to USC as well. And just like George mentioned, working with a ton of filmmakers that were there at the school. Because, one of the things that you ask about advice for later on, which maybe we'll just hint at a little bit, is really finding people that are at the same level that you are and starting to make stuff with them. And eventually, as they rise, you will rise. But we'll come back to that later. And then after that, there was no studio waiting for me. So I ended up taking my technology degree or experience and my music degree, and I formed a company called Composer Tech, where I did technical support for other composers, and did that for about 7 years, and finally closed that. And by the time I closed that business, all the people that I've been working with, they started getting their gigs and started hiring me. And now looking back, I was like, wow, I can actually now just make a living 100% on doing this, which is pretty wonderful, and really happy to be at this stage.
That's amazing. I love that journey. Who would have thought from tech, tech to, well, music to tech to back to tech to music, and then like this beautiful fusion. I love that, Jongnic.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah. So I do want to touch upon what you said as well, because I think it's absolutely natural. I feel like, that relationship and finding peers that you can grow with and help with, how you were saying, you started composing for some of the other students. We're definitely huge advocates of that. And yeah, I am curious if that was the journey as well for some of you out there, of that was also what was helpful in getting you to your place of being a film composer and building your career. So I'm curious, Dara, kind of what was your journey when it came to film composing, and if you also had something similar where you were growing with someone else, or was it just like, boom, here's my opportunity, I'm taking it?
Well, first of all, I'm going to break up this little alumni association here. I did not go to USC.
Me either. UCLA actually as well.
The party is over. No. Yeah, I studied undergraduate kind of general music, and I was a voice major at Cornell as an undergrad. And I was studying art songs and arias, and I was studying as a mezzo-soprano because that's kind of what I knew. Again, kind of like Jongnic was saying, being a musician meant being a performer. But I realized that wasn't really where I wanted to be. I really liked being behind the scenes a little more. And I was having a conversation with someone in my music theory class, and she's like, I want to write music for movies. And I'm like, that's, kind of like the same awakening. It's like, oh, that's a job. And then I kind of started doing a little more like contemporary classical composition while at undergrad, and eventually decided to, I went to NYU for my master's program, and was still kind of like hanging out in New York afterwards. Love New York as a city. It's, to me, what I always say on all of these things is like, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But if you can't, you pack up your bags, you move to LA, and you try again there. Because, I guess it's just about meeting the right people, and perhaps I didn't meet the right people there. The industry is a little smaller and harder to get into. So I moved out here. I did sort of a different route, even though I kind of have a multi-pronged approach of, meeting directors and producers and kind of growing with them, but I also did the assistant route. So I came here, I did an internship for Sonic Fuel Studios. That turned into being studio manager for a few months because the studio manager left as my internship was ending. Then that turned into working part-time for Chris Leonard's, into full-time for Chris Leonard's, into additional music and score producing, and eventually co-scoring a project, and then venturing off on my own. So I kind of, and by the time I had kind of left, I made a lot of connections with people in that camp, whether it's music supervisors or agents or, that whole lot, music execs, who I've kind of become on their radar during that time. So that was kind of my approach, a different ladder to climb.
That is so cool. I mean,
I'm also not a USC alum. Went to Berkeley, and just like everyone here, kind of a huge surprise to know that there was a job that existed in creating music for films. I speak for myself. I had a secret childhood dream of becoming an actor, and I was a musician for the longest of times. I started playing piano when I was 6 as well, then ventured into playing percussion and played in the Medellin Philharmonic, the Colombian Philharmonic as well, and had all the orchestra kind of background, but also didn't see myself being performer. I mean, I deeply respect teachers and performers, but it was just something that I didn't want to pursue. And a year before graduating high school, I went to this random recital where this guy went to Argentina to study film music, and I was just like, I fell in love with it at that time. And this was just perfect timing because I was starting to look into different schools and undergraduates that were actually focused in film composing. And Berkeley was one of the few schools that they didn't take into account whether or not you had composed before, but just your talent in your instrument. And at the end of the day, had the opportunity to go there, dual major in electronic production and design, and that kind of helped me just work on my first feature film before graduating, which was actually a Colombian feature that went to Sundance. That was my first Sundance film in 2016, and that was my calling card when I moved to LA. So I've been in LA just for 5 years now. So I think I'm more junior than Jongnic. I think.
Fine, you beat me.
Oh, I love this. This is too great. All right, Tony, we have to hear your journey now because
well,
I heard everyone's kind of excited for yours now.
I went to USC, so I'm on that camp, but I also went to Berkeley, so maybe I can get love on both sides of the aisle here. I don't know.
Tony, you're just a two-timer, man. Two-timer.
I'm sorry, man. I play both sides. It's sense. So it's very similar to everyone here. You know, I did actually grow up wanting to be a performer. You know, I started playing guitar at a very early age, and you know, was in bands all growing up. And my dream was always, I'm gonna be a rock star. I don't know how I'm gonna be a rock star, but I'm gonna be in a band, and we're gonna tour. I'm gonna do all that, and it's gonna be perfect. And of course, you know, but I had parents who were very practical, and they had always, even though they were supportive of music and always, you know, got me lessons, let my band practice in the basement, and like, you know, let me run amok with that. They always had made sure that my trajectory was on a formal education. And so, you know, the agreement was, okay, what about a music school? If I, you know, do that, can I study music and maybe still be a rock star, all that. So that trajectory led me to Berkeley. And when I went to Berkeley, my mindset was still of, well, you know, I'm still in bands. I'm just going to become a better musician and, you know, be well-rounded, but still be, you know, a rock star at some point. And quickly after getting to Berkeley, you know, when you go to a music school, they and I wasn't ready for this. They not only are you getting, like, you know, obviously education, well-rounded, but they throw different things at you. So I wasn't expecting to learn about composition, arranging, theory, like deeper understanding of theory, film music, you know, all these things that came up. And kind of, you know, the writing kind of was on the wall. My freshman year, towards the end of the freshman year, I had a band that was back in my hometown, and, you know, I was like the person who went, you know, I was the member who went away, but we didn't want to break up. And I was like, come down to Boston, let's play clubs here, and da-da-da-da. And at the same time, that was kind of fracturing. I was discovering other things in life and in music and film music. A friend of mine told me about this film music class that was like an appreciation of film music. So just like an entry-level thing. I took it, and I instantly fell in love with the idea of that as a career, and that people actually are paid to make this gorgeous music. At the same time, I should say, I also really fell in love with the orchestra, the sound of the orchestra, which I was never like unaware of growing up. But again, kind of folding into the music education, it was something that was just fascinating to me. So it was like, wow, orchestra and film music, I think that's where I need to pivot. So that's how I ended up turning my attention to that and moving forward, and which graduating from Berkeley led me to USC for the scoring for motion picture and television program, mostly because a friend in my film scoring major at Berkeley was headed there. And when I heard about it, it was I didn't feel completely prepared for the world after Berkeley in regards to going to be a film composer. So it seemed like a natural thing to try and apply for. So I got in, fortunate enough to get in, and I moved to LA. And you know, they had heroes teaching at the program of mine. They had Golden Era, Elmer Bernstein, who's a very famous Golden Era composer, Jerry Goldsmith, all these composers who have since passed away were actually teaching. And so it was kind of amazing. It was like, wow, I can go and learn from them and kind of get more into this. So that was an easy draw to get me into LA. So got here, and how I went from there, and kind of tying to your question about relationships and meeting people, and you know, how do you nurture this career. I definitely spent the first few years after college working the film program over at SC, and putting up my flyers, composer available to score, pulling down little flyers, and this is before smartphones, everybody. Checking out people who were looking for composers for their thesis film and all that stuff, and made a lot of great relationships that way. But the reality of it was, after a few years, I had to work. I had to earn money. I had to pay my rent and figure life out, while this dream of being a professional musician was working itself out. And so at the same time, I ended up becoming, I got some opportunities to work in the commercial world, writing music for commercials, and took those. And eventually that led to meeting more composers around town, and kind of similar to Dara, but I didn't go the assistant route. I ended up meeting a lot of composers and facilitating additional work for them, for myself, to earn money. So I became someone who was arranging for other composers, ghostwriting for other composers, performing guitar, producing music on their cues, and just hustling work to get out of my day job, which had nothing to do with music, and to move things forward. So those relationships I built in the film world and some other student filmmakers, I still have a lot of friends from that time today, but not many of them moved forward in their career the way that would have been beneficial to our creative bond, right? So yeah, so fast forward, I ended up doing a lot of that work that I mentioned about additional writing for many years. Eventually started to get more opportunities for myself through these connections, parlayed them into some solid relationships, and now back into the meeting filmmakers, and always open to expanding the network, which is really what you got to do. And here we are.
Amazing. Such great journeys from all of you. Thank you so much for sharing how you got to be in this beautiful world of music composing. And I think I love just how varied they all are. So it just kind of shows to all of our audience as well, just, the multitude of ways you can access music composition, and, through support and hustling, right? And then, and sometimes just discovering music composition and leaning into it, and doing the work to get there. So thank you all so much. What I love the most about all of you is, of course, your diverse compositions, and then as well your diverse, colorful, beautiful skin and all your backgrounds. And I'm really curious just how your perspective has and your experience through being a beautiful person of color has inspired or transcribed through your music compositions, and yeah, what makes your composition so special, and why is it so important for you to keep creating and putting yourself out there, when I know that we're not necessarily the majority in many of these film composing circles. So I am curious to see if you'd be willing to dive a little deeper on that topic with me. I can start with George, if you want.
Yeah, so I know that, this is one thing that a lot of my Asian actor friends complain about, is that they're expected to do martial arts, because most of the stereotypical roles for Asians require martial arts. So, but for me, I almost felt like, in a way, I needed to embrace that. So for me, I actually love to write music for Chinese instruments and Chinese percussion. And in fact, I would love to do a martial arts film at some point. And so I felt like, if there's one thing that's going to set me apart, because I could absolutely do that, the very typical Western classical orchestra sound that many composers have. How can I compete with everyone else that does it so well? So I thought, very early on, I started learning about Chinese instruments, how to play some of them, and like using them in my compositions. And I actually produced an album of music inspired by martial arts films. And, it was something that I always thought, if there's ever an opportunity, particularly, in the past, decade, there's been so many opportunities with the films being made in China, so I felt like there's got to be some way I can use this talent to tap into something to get me some work. And so what really helped is actually the TV show I just booked this year. Really, it was my passion for Chinese instruments that really helped the showrunners, pick me to do their show. And so I think having something that was just unique to me, that I was passionate about, that kind of set me apart from other composers, really helped in so many ways.
So I have an interesting story with regards to this. When I first got to LA 10 years ago, right before I started USC, I met one of my composer heroes, Christoph Beck, and I had a chance to sort of talk with him one-on-one. And we had followed the same trajectory, same undergrad, going to USC. And I said, hey, I'm trying to be a Black you. And he laughed at the joke, and we became friends ever since. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, you're going to have a tough time getting started. Again, this was 10 years ago. He said, one, you're old, because again, this was the second career for me. And he said, Hollywood tends to skew young. He said, but, you have a youthful demeanor and no one can tell your age, which I read in the lines, Black don't crack. So he said, just don't tell anybody your age and maybe lie on your IMDb page, right? So that was the first thing. So, but the second thing is going to be a little bit harder for you to hide the fact that you're Black. And when people look at you, right, they're not going to envision that you can write the music that they want for their films. So that's something that you're going to have to figure out how to overcome. That gave me the desire when I got to USC to double down on writing, traditional underscores and really sort of focusing on working with an orchestra and trying to push my creative proclivities into the more Western general way of writing and approaching these scores. And I left anything that I had been writing before, which was more sort of in the R&B or hip hop kind of vein, to the side. When I got to USC and when I started working with filmmakers, kind of honestly, I was the only person of color in my entire class of 20 kids. And when I asked or looked back on like previous years, there hadn't been another African American for 6 or 7 years prior. So really, there was very few people, well, African Americans specifically, in the course or even in the history of the school. But when I got there, I found that all of the brown people, all of like the Latino folks, all of the African Americans came to me because we shared that common background of being sort of, the minority in a mostly predominantly white institution. So we were able to bond on that. And most of the films that I worked on were actually from people of color. And of course, what they wanted was a more sort of organic sound to the environments and the stories that they were telling. So leaning into the hip hop and the R&B, right? I had to do that for that. So all of a sudden there was a style that became and emerged that was a combination of these more popular styles of music with my training on how to actually tell a story with things like the orchestra or using, instrumentation as opposed to lyrics. And being able to meld these two worlds together has really been able to allow me to create a style that I think is unique to myself and really allows me to create music that is organic and feels natural to the people that are actually on the screen. So the thing that I ran away from in the beginning is the thing that actually is providing now a career for me.
I've had the opposite experience. Um,
And I still love you, Dara.
um, my sensibilities, I mean, other than, orchestra and all that stuff, they're pretty Americana and folksy and quirky and those sorts of things. And I, as I grew, I would get approached to like put in a lot of reels for stuff, and they're like, okay, so we have there's a show that we want you to put a reel together for. I'm like, okay, it's about an African American family in Detroit, and and then they're like, they want fresh beats, and I'm like, okay, and and it's something that I kind of did the opposite. I didn't hide it. I had to find it, uh, I suppose, because I also didn't want to just like, oh, I don't do that. I had to learn how to do that. But it's one of those things where like it makes you feel really self-conscious about the things you can do if everything that you're being approached with are things that you don't do. Um, Pretty innately and inherently. So that was kind of a fight within myself for a while. But yeah, I mean, I think now people kind of learned what I do, and they're okay with approaching me for those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to pepper in some beats, then I can do that. But yeah, I did not. I grew up in a gospel choir, but that's probably the strongest tie I have to a lot of traditionally Black music. Um, um, Even though I end up writing a lot of jazz, which is, I guess, America's music, but steeped in the African American tradition. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm see people. Some people might call it naive. I try and find the positives in everything. That's just how I like to live my life. Otherwise, I get stressed out and I can't write and I can't think. So I took coming, and again, I think if I had come to LA earlier, I might have had a very different experience. But coming to LA like 7.5 years ago, something like that, I kind of came as all of these diversity programs were emerging, um, and people were starting to pay attention to that. And to me, being in a room, I mean, I'm very often the only woman in the room or the only person of color in the room, and to me, that's just like, well, those people are going to remember me. They may not remember my my friend over here because it looks like everyone else, but they'll remember me, whether or not they remember my name, whatever. But they'll remember my face. I was like, oh yeah, you. I'm like, yeah, me. I'm here, shining brightly. You can't miss me. So I just try and find the pros and
I
let the
love that.
cons wash away in time.
Definitely.
Dara,
I
are
think.
you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
No. Please go ahead with the question. You had a question for Dara.
I just had one question for Dara, David.
Mm-hmm.
So because you are a female, are you seeing more women in the film composing world? Are you seeing an increase in it by any chance?
I think in the last 5 years there's been an increase. I think it all depends on where those increases are. There are a lot of women in documentaries. There are an increasing amount of women in television. Film still needs some help and some work and some time. But yeah, it's growing ever so slightly.
Wonderful. And you're doing the work. The more that you're appearing, the more that they're like, oh yeah, you. Then
Yeah.
other people will be like, hey, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, David, please continue.
Well, I just had a experience, something that I just thought of. At some point, someone did ask me, like, being Latino, does it close doors on you just because you're so different and because you understand life so differently? And I was like, just like Jongnic, I leaned into some of the things that represent me. And there was one project, there's a TV show that I'm working right now on that actually came from that dual major, that second complementary study that I did on electronic production. And it was me trying to find a way to meet ends or make ends meet by the first 2 years in LA that I started creating reggaeton and Latin urban beats and kind of leaning into that. And at first I thought, okay, I'm gonna keep that persona away from David, the film composer. But at the end of the day, actually something that was pretty refreshing, at least in my experience, was that people would actually value the other side of, okay, you have been a part of the orchestra, you've played in orchestras, you can write for orchestras, but you can also do these very different things like creating beats and making songs, but also kind of using that Latino background of some influences that come from Africa. And we're incredibly happy and we love to dance and we are incredibly kind of rhythm driven people. So that was actually very interesting to experiment and live, that it wasn't actually a bad thing to be a Latino, at least during this time, because I'm very conscious that years before things were very different. And right now I'm incredibly lucky that inclusion is a thing that people are talking about and people are trying to definitely include more in terms of grabbing talent that is authentic to the stories. I think Blast Beat, the last Sundance film, was actually a way of doing that. That film wouldn't have been perhaps as authentic, as real, if perhaps directors were American or if the composer was American as well. And it had to go through these lenses of Colombians that have struggled through the stereotypes, through us being kind of the capital for drugs for so many years, that kind of shine through not only in picture but also through music and through sound, that told people wherever the film was being shown, hey, we are authentic, we are different, but this story that we're bringing you is also something that you can represent yourself and see yourself shining through. So I think that I'm incredibly lucky to be in a time where inclusion is definitely something that people are speaking about. And at the end of the day, just like Dara said, you just have to find the way to perhaps use those pros in your career, because at the end of the day, you just want to get your voice out there and your stories out there as real as possible.
You know, let's not get it twisted. Diversification, inclusion, it's all really about making money. And there have been several studies that show that when you actually have diverse stories, diverse casts, whatever, the production actually does better. And it's something actually that we've known for a long time in business. When you actually have a diverse executive team or diversity in management, that the business actually does better because you end up with all these points of views and you can reach more people. So something that we've known a long time in business is now finally translating over into entertainment. And they're realizing that, you know, if we are going to actually stay relevant and if we're going to produce content that's going to continue to make our studios money, we need to be looking at different kinds of stories because that's what people want. And if we're also looking at the browning of America, well, the browning of America wants different kinds of stories. So I know that we're all excited that we are having these opportunities to really bring our authentic selves and the things that we do naturally to film scores, and that film scores and the definition of what a film score is now changing and being way broader. And now all of a sudden we can have a black metal Colombian reggaeton score for a film, whereas 10 years ago it would have just been an orchestra, right, trying to create that sound. So we do need to sort of appreciate the fact that we have this ability to be our authentic selves, and when appropriate, lean into that. right? Because that's what people are looking for. But let's not also get it twisted, is that it's really all based on economics at this point as well. And just as another aside, a little sort of juicy tidbit for our viewers here. I didn't like David before I met him because the people at Macro introduced me to Esteban for Black Speech. So yes, you and I were competing for the same same film. And I did a whole demo. I found my Colombian people. I brought them on board. We did something, did a whole reggaeton thing, but it was fine. You know what? Because again, the relationship was that David and the director, you guys actually worked on the short together, and you had been together for a long time, also coming from the same community. So hearing that entire story, I hate you a little less now, David. But but it also underscores the fact that these relationships and working with filmmakers, you know, when they have nothing, really, when they have nothing, especially if you grab onto one that, you know, has a vision and you have a great working relationship, that these things will grow and turn into opportunities, like having a film like Blast Beat at Sundance. It was the same thing for me with The Land, my first film at Sundance years ago. Same thing, the filmmaker that I met at USC and worked on everything. And when he had his opportunity to, you know, work on his first feature, I was right there with him. So, okay, David, I'm having you a lot less now because, you know, it's very similar.
I'm so glad, dude. I didn't know that. I actually didn't know that. So I'm happy you like me a little bit more.
But it also shows that it's such a small world. It is such a small world, and the composing community here in LA is so small. And a lot of times, you know, we're all up for the same kind of projects. I was up for a project with Dara, who actually won out for me. We both demoed for The Pride. I think it was episode 3. So, you know, but again, we all stay friends. And as long as we keep the relationships and the love, and we are celebrating everybody's opportunity to shine, you know, that's really what it's all about, and keeping the community wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I always like to say that, yes, it's important to make relationships and network, but like take it a step further, look for communities that can help support you, that you can collaborate with. You know, like Lalif is obviously a great place to meet new people to work with. And, you know, for us, the Composers Diversity Collective has been a wonderful community for us composers. And, you know, I don't feel like I'm competing with you guys, because we are cheering each other on, and we're so happy for each other's success. And I don't think we need to worry about the competition aspect of it, because we're supporting each other. It's amazing.
Beautiful. And I know you're supporting a ton of new composers as well that are coming up. George, I would love if you guys can expand a little bit on the Composers Diversity Collective and what that's about, a little bit for our audience members out there who are also interested in hearing more.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, you have half the executive committee here, me, Dara, Tony, and Jongnic. You know, we formed it along with Michael Abels and a number of other composers, what was it, 2-3 years ago?
Years ago.
Yeah, so we are trying to basically, well, there's several things we're doing. First, we're creating a community for composers to support each other, to mentor and all those things. But also, we are trying to make the industry aware that diversity has been a huge problem in the composing side of things. Whereas for years, they've been doing, you know, diversity programs for actors, writers, directors. And so we are trying to reach out to the studios and music supervisors, music execs, and just letting you know that we are here, and we have a directory on our website, as well as just, you know, we're being a resource. If you need to find a specific, you know, composer voice, you know, we have so many voices that are talented and available for work. So we're really trying to push that forward within the industry.
Beautiful. So we'll be sure to post too, and we'll be promoting it as well, so that we can get more people to inquire, and those that are interested with you for the Composers Diversity Collective.
I'm interested.
Yes.
Definitely.
David. Well, we'll see if Jongnic, I think Jongnic will accept you now.
I don't know.
Yeah, we're
I don't
rooting
know.
for you, man.
I don't know, man.
I don't know. We're not there yet. We'll see.
He's
So
not the
mean,
only
man.
voice.
So
You're
mean.
in.
Dara, thank you. Thank you for the love.
Yeah, we got your back here.
I love that. Now, I know that we were speaking earlier about, you know, yes, you do want, and when you find these stories, right, for example, like the script of Blast Beat, we were able to be your authentic self as a music composer, or finding scripts that really aligned with the heart of like even culturally what you'd want to represent, or you wanting to represent out of your sounds and your music. It is sometimes tough, and I know it is increasing, diversity is increasing, and these authentic stories are coming more forward now, which is really exciting. But like we said, sometimes it's like, I need to make that money, honey. So some of these independents are very tough. So I do want to hear about Real Change and the fund for diversity in film scoring. And so if you can talk about that as well, because I think that's a lot of help that a lot of new and upcoming composers are needing when it comes to support in creating their art.
I mean,
Good segue.
absolutely. Good segue. Tony, mind if I jump in real quick?
Not at all. Just go ahead.
Okay. So,
Yes.
you know, when we were thinking about this diversity problem and supporting people, I think there were 3 steps in it. One was evangelism and letting people know that there is a career out here in film scoring. And, you know, just giving that sort of light bulb to folks, because I didn't have it, Dara didn't have it, right? And it was someone else who sort of told us about it. It's like, oh, this is something that I could potentially do. So 1 is evangelism. 2 is actually education. As you also find out, you know, all of us went to school to study music, right? So there's an education component of it as well. And then finally, which is where Real Change comes in, it's once you get that first opportunity to really create and be part of a production that's going to be seen, how can you be supported financially to really bring your best musical sense, create the best score that you possibly can, right? And the fund is really geared to supporting a composer at that critical stage. It's not really there for someone who's just starting out and working on a short or this or that, but it's like, for example, you know, David, who I've got a film going to Sundance, and they're only paying me, I don't know how much they paid you, but as an example, they're only paying me $10,000. And I would love to be able to have, you know, some sort of orchestral score, some sort of realization with live musicians or this or that, which I can't afford with the budget that they gave me. So the Real Change Fund is for that specific instance where you've got a film that's going to have some legs, right? And it's going to either be a part of a festival run, or maybe it will be on some sort of independent channel, but it's really something that you want to bet the farm on. I'm going to bet the farm on this opportunity, right? Then the Real Change Fund is there to support and really give you the resources to bring you the best score you can possibly write, and give you the resources that you need to produce that score. Because look, at the end of the day, we as film composers, we work with the constraints of our resources. If someone says, you have $1,000, well, guess what? I'm going to break out the kazoo and 2 spoons, and I'm going to do that, right? It's going to be the best kazoo and 2 spoons score you've ever heard, but still, you know, I'm limited to those instrumentation. Where now, if I understand that, you know, Real Change, we give grants up to about $20,000. Now, all of a sudden, oh, I can actually hire a chamber orchestra overseas, or I can actually travel to a location and grab that indigenous music that I'm looking for, right, for my score. Now you have resources to actually expand your vision and hopefully bring you, you know, a score that will be noticed along with the film. We also know, look, the other thing that's we keep in mind here is that our careers live and die based on the projects that we are a part of. I could write an Oscar-winning score for something, but if no one sees that movie, it ain't gonna win no dang Oscar, right? So that being said, we are asking the composers who are asking for, you know, the grant, be cognizant of, is this film going to have the legs? Is this the one that's going to be career changing for me? Because that's really what the fund is about, to give you the best visible opportunity when that is appropriate for you.
Yeah, it's geared towards also, just to underline, it's definitely geared towards the independent film. It's not for like studio films. This is for those that need and could use the support to make a better project when funds are hard to come by. So it's also an interesting thing because this is not only for the composers. This is also should be considered for the filmmakers. Directors should be definitely have their eyes on this. If they've got a relationship with a composer, or if they are aware of this and they know they don't have the money, but they want a certain thing that just is going to be really hard to do with what they can afford, they should certainly know and pass it along to their director. I'm sorry, their composer, because they can't apply as a director, but they can certainly tell their composer so they're aware of it and they can work together in conjunction. And being on this advisory panel with JB, sometimes we've seen applications with the director involved helping sell their film, and that's great because they're serious about this, and it helps the application process. One thing that JB didn't mention was Jongnic, is that along with support with funds, there's also mentorship available. So if this is kind of your first time in this sort of level of a project, or if you just want to chat and whatever, this is powered by CSAC and Christoph Beck, who Jongnic mentioned earlier, and has a great list of other advisory members, Chris Bowers and Miriam Cutler, and anyone who's accessible basically for you to talk to and get some advice from in the process, if you're able to be selected as a recipient. So yeah, it's a really great thing.
Unbelievable. That's amazing. I love what you're all doing, and we will definitely promote it even more on LaLeaf's end, because we just absolutely want to make sure that everyone's taking advantage of these fantastic opportunities that you're putting in front of them. And yeah, you all have such a hustle to you. You all have a beautiful energy, and you've been working for so long that it's also so just refreshing and exciting to see what you're doing back for our community and for these composers that are also ready to follow in your footsteps and create new paths all on their own. So we will absolutely continue to promote for all of you, and thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing to increase the much needed diversity, because it does resonate, right? As a listener and as a viewer of art, when you kind of are able to be like, oh, I remember hearing that growing up, or I like those sounds, and and all of you definitely do that with your artwork. So we're just absolutely honored to have you. Thank you so much. So we're going to jump now, everybody, to some questions from the audience. We have one from Kerwin Young, and Kerwin one asks, do all of you have composer assistants, or are you able to handle the workload yourself? Is it necessary to have assistants?
I'll jump in. I do have an assistant. An assistant is, stating the obvious. It comes if you need it, and you need one when you get to a certain place where basic structure, basic organization becomes too hard to track. When you are tasked with creating, which we all have our own process of how we write, and that time is getting diluted with I have to email people, I have to make a list of this, I have to make a list of that, I gotta, it's hard to keep up. And if you've got a family, and if you've got whatever going on outside of this world, it can be a lot to handle. So yeah, assistants are definitely part of the game once you get to a certain level of busyness, but I have one, so that's my answer.
I just hired my first assistant from the Composers Diversity Collective, actually.
Yeah.
And and it was one of those things, like it was less than a year between being an assistant and needing an assistant. And I thought that I'd have more time. And I pride myself in being really organized. But I started forgetting small things or losing track of small things, and it was just, yeah, it was just a lot to handle. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get. And people are like, you should hire an assistant. I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. And of course, what I did was I waited too late, and I was like in the thick of it. I'm like, I don't have time to hire an assistant. It takes time. So it's a weird balancing act. But yeah, I mean, he's only been with me for about a month now, but it's already really, really helpful just to have someone else's eyes on stuff. And if someone asks a question that he knows the answer to, he could just answer it. And then I'm like, okay, that's done. That's one less thing that I need to think about.
They're also. Sorry, go ahead, George.
Going to kind of, dip your toes into working with other people is just working on a project by project basis. Because for the longest time, I did everything by myself. And, sometimes you just have a deadline you have to make. And so you might bring on an orchestrator or someone to do additional music for you, someone to do some programming or mixing or whatever it is that can help you deliver on time. And so that really is what it comes down to. So you can start with those little things and then build your team as your career grows and your projects become more demanding.
And there are different roles for assistants. Sometimes, like I started with George, which was sort of on per project. I need someone to help me bounce out stems. That's what I did for Tony. He hired me for a couple of days to come out and bounce out stems for him and to sort of keep his rig working. So I did that for a while, and then I moved to a point where I needed a full-time assistant, which I just hired also from the Composers Diversity Collective starting in January this year. And he ended up, I hired him more for as a writing assistant because at this point there are too many projects sort of going on, and I really needed help with someone to really lend some hands as far as like writing music and taking my initial ideas and working it to picture, or conforming things when they come in with picture changes and basically making sure it's actually working out to the new picture cut. So there are all these tasks that assistants can do, everything from helping you keep your personal life organized, or helping keep the business organized, or potentially, again, helping on more the creative side of things, becoming more of like a writing partner. So there are various levels of assistantship that you'll find as you move through your career.
Yeah, and I had different levels of assistantship throughout my assistantship. It was kind of a general progression. So I've kind of experienced all of those jobs.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. All right, so let's move on. We have 2 more questions from the audience. Unless they chime in, feel free, audience. We still have a little bit of time. Elliot Campos asks, do directors, producers seek more of your own voice as a composer or prefer more of an education and knowledge? And has education been more important and necessary in your experience? So it sounds like there's 3 questions there. So do directors, producers seek more of your own voice as a composer or perform more education and knowledge, and how important is education?
Well, I'll just, yeah, I mean, go ahead, David. I'll answer after.
No, because let's put an example. Like Jongnic has been here longer than me, and he's a very capable composer, and perhaps just for that Blast Beat project, kind of what he said, the cultural background, the previous relationship that there was. I think at the end of the day, the most important thing I would say a director or a producer is looking for in a composer is someone that they can trust. Because if you think about it, music is one of the few things in a film that they don't speak the language of, and at the end you are coming there as another storyteller, and confidence and them being able to hand you their project, their baby, literally, for so many years is definitely something that comes from trust. And another thing that so many people say in the industry is you have to be fun to work with. I mean, no one wants to be working several days on a project, speaking a language that they not necessarily talk fluently, and then just not have a great experience or a blast doing, pun intended. But I think that's, at the end of the day, in my opinion, one of the most important things that make us composers collaborators for so many producers and directors.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get hung up on education, being educated in music. Like I know so many people who are doing this who have never had any sort of formal training. They just, they're just working on instincts, and self-taught musicians, composers. There's some technical aspects to doing this that, you can learn, or I've seen like, pop artists get paired with like, composers via agents to help them with the mechanics of putting music to picture, but that has nothing to do with their education. If you write good music that moves a filmmaker is going to reach out to you, whether you know how to read music or not. So I wouldn't put too much into that.
I differ a little bit from Tony on that perspective because, one thing is I taught actually at USC and at Occidental College. So you're trying to mess up my cheddar first and foremost. But second, you cannot teach someone to have a voice, and you cannot teach someone to have musical instincts. That only comes from playing music, writing music, and just leading a musical life, as I call it, right? So you can't teach that. And that's exactly what Tony is saying. If someone likes your instincts, the education is not as important. But I will vote that education allows you to pivot, and education allows you to expand your instincts. So this way, through education, I can now sort of write in various different styles because I have a musical language and a way to sort of absorb that music and then incorporate it into what I do. And having an education that's steeped in music theory, that's steeped in music history, it allows me to sort of, really like the Borg, grab all these other things and really expand my horizons and thus expand my instincts. So, and because, look, we're film composers, and someday we might have to work on a Western. Someday you might have to work on a period piece. Someday you have to work on, an inner city drama. And being able to pivot and write music for all of those contexts, I believe that's only really possible with having a musical education. So I think it is important for the longevity and the pivotosity, I just made up a word here, pivotosity.
That's a good word.
Of your career.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, to underline what you're saying, I totally agree with you. It is necessary for the longevity of the career because, yeah, you can come in with, your instincts and, what you got you the interest from the filmmaker, and that job's probably going to go great. But if you want to do this as a career and a long career, exactly what Jongnic is saying is, you need to certainly be educated in ways that you can expand from beyond what your instincts do. And it is a business. So to maintain a career, there's like a whole other, you have to definitely think long-term and, bring it all together and not be necessarily somebody who can only write that one thing, because that job may never happen again. That one thing, So yeah, I'll roll it back a little bit. Sorry about your cheddar.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And I would say, I've worked with so many composers that are still breaking out scores and studying them, still taking private lessons with other people, still, trying to cobble together. It's a lifelong process. And I think education needs to be at the key, a core portion of that lifelong process, whether it's studying other instruments. George didn't wake up learning how to play Chinese instruments. I know he looks Asian, but that's not part of like Kung Fu, that's not part of his DNA, right? So from that perspective, being able to have that education of being able to assimilate and absorb the capability, that all comes through education.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. You guys make me laugh. I can chat with you for 5 more hours. I won't do that to you, but I'm having too much fun. All right, we have another question from Catherine Lester. We have 2 more. She says, "Hola, I'm curious. Do you all play a musical instrument now or in the past? And if so, did you begin composing film scores using that instrument or another tool?"
For me, I started on the piano lessons when I was, I think, 10, and then started playing the clarinet at 12. And 12 is kind of when I started composing, and yeah, I very much used the piano to compose for the most part. Although you know, in college I also picked up a little bit of guitar. So when I'm writing certain kind of grooves and contemporary stuff, it helps to break out the guitar and just strum some chords. Yeah, for me it's hard to separate playing from any other aspect of music making for me.
All right.
I play the guitar. I started out on guitar. Guitar is what got me into music, and as I shifted gears to becoming a composer, certainly moved to the piano more, because the piano is where we all work, because it will trigger sounds from our computers, so you have to have some sort of a general knowledge of it. And then just tricks of the trade. I mean, all of us are put in positions where we have to produce scores where we may not be able to afford to hire somebody to play that instrument or this instrument. So sometimes just by that, because I'm a guitar player, fortunately that there's a lot of other stringed instruments like mandolin and bass and other types of guitars that I've self-taught myself to just, be able to produce things. But yeah, at the end of the day, I don't find myself jamming much anymore. I will admit to that, because it's I will do it every now and then, but it's not, when I was younger, I would play much more. Nowadays, it's it's a little here and there.
You be in your parents' basement, rocking it out.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Making lots of noise.
And then one day we're gonna hear Dara sing.
Yeah.
I mean, I do incorporate, and it depends. I was talking to my friend the other day, and I sent her like some demo I did. She's like, "Oh, who's singing?" I'm like, "Oh, that's me." If it's in like the texture, I'll keep my voice in there. But if it's like the lead instrument, then I will replace it with someone else who's been in practice more, because I'm pretty out of practice. But because that's just too many layers of self-consciousness for me to deal with. But yeah, I mean, I play, I learned guitar, I learned the bass, I learned ukulele and all these other things. And I say some I play better than others, but I can play them all well enough to write. And then if it's something I'm like, this could use some more polish, then I will send it to my friend to replace. And I do that a lot. And I'm sure he's tired of my hey-os. What you got? What you got going on right now? So I mean, I just love working with musicians too. I'm not very good at keeping my money, as you can see, but I work a lot. I love working with musicians and like getting their expertise on something, because I've learned these things over the course of the last, however many years, but there are people who have, done this almost their entire lives, or they've started playing clarinet at 12. I mean, I guess I also did, but I'm bad. And yeah, it's just always great to get someone's take on it, and they'll phrase things better than I will, and all that stuff. So I love working with other people whenever possible.
Yeah, and other people can definitely bring different ideas, because they can also kind of blend their universe and how they understand whatever it is that we ask them, in terms of feelings, in terms of what I want to convey with a melody. And if, again, the budget allows it, I think that collaborators on the music side, musicians, performers, are always just a great thing to have, because then they can definitely give you something that you had never thought of for the project. And at the end of the day, it's just what's best for the film. I myself started playing piano and played percussion. While in high school, I played a little bit of trombone because I wanted to be also a salsa player, just because Latino, you know how we are. But yeah, if the budget allows it, I'm always gonna have someone that has been practicing their instrument always on board.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you guys so much. so multi-talented and multifaceted, and you're like, no, for this thing, I'm going to step out of this and I'm going to collaborate with someone else and see what magic they bring. All right, we have a last question from Juan. It says Juan. How do you deal with offers or opportunities that feel more like a superficial diversity checkbox from the employer?
Money is money. I'll put that out there first.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are definitely instances where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm checking a couple of boxes, and that's a thing that I still kind of struggle and deal with, and it's kind of a personal journey. But if this is going to help me lead to other things, then someone else will take it. So unless it feels demeaning to you for one reason or another, then don't do that, because then you'll resent it and you'll resent music, you'll resent the industry, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, all those things are like, oh, well, this is steeped in the African American experience, which is obviously monolith, and everyone had the same experience, right? You're from the inner city, right? Kind of a thing. But I don't know. Jobs are difficult to get.
Yeah.
I mean,
take them.
I want to jump in on this one because I have I have a personal experience in this a little bit too, and I think you really put it eloquent. You really put it really clear right now when you said, as long as it doesn't feel insulting, a job is a job, and it could lead to other jobs. So, and it's hard to say to someone, okay, I know you're doing this for just that reason. Case in point, when I got the opportunity to demo for Elena of Avalor, I have, up to that point in my career, I had, not come across any sort of opportunity where culturally it was overtoned, like, okay, are they calling me because of my name to demo for this project? What is this like? This was like 6 years ago. So the everything that's happening today wasn't as out there, right? So I was very suspicious, and the pride in me was a little bit, I was hesitant because I was like, well, they wouldn't hire me because if do they not like my music? Is it just like, am I checking the box? And, regardless of what my music's like, because I can get this job because of my music, not because of my name. That was where, my pride was at. In looking back at the experience and knowing, what I know now, and in fact, when they do offer you a project, you do have to demo it, and you do get selected blindly. So it definitely was not like, oh, he demoed, so he should get the job because his last name is Morales. So one, I did earn it. And then two, the point about you never know where it's going to lead, and jobs are absolutely hard to come by. This career is very hard to get off the ground. I have made so many friends and connections from that project when I had some initial hesitancy about, am I just getting this gig, when that wasn't the case, but it changed my life. And so I wouldn't put too much stock in that. And you definitely have to think long-term, so long as it's not something that in your heart you feel like it's insulting, which I can't imagine would be the case in a lot of these situations. But look, I mean, if someone's going to give you the opportunity, take advantage of it, because it's like it's your superpower.
I just want to add one last thing to this, which is, I think we should change the narrative on this, because for decades, white folks had no problem coming in and telling our stories. They never said, oh, this is an inner city drama. Why don't we have someone else score this? That was never a question. So if we now have the opportunity to tell our stories, I don't care how it comes. You need to grab that and tell that story like no one else can. Because other people have been telling our stories for way too long. And it needs to end now. And if it's like, oh, they're checking a box, check that damn box. You know what? Color that box and blow it up. Do such an amazing job that now they want you. That's the goal. The goal is get the foot in the door and then blow that door open. Because guess what? If you do a great job, it's not just about you, it's everybody else behind you that's trying to get in. I recently had an opportunity to demo for a project that's way out of my league, way out of my stratosphere, right? But the studio was open to doing it because someone else that looked like me did an amazing job. So it's not about you. It's about everybody else that is coming behind you. It's about our community. It's about raising our cultures to the awareness of where they need to be. So let's change the narrative on this stuff. Let's change it. Blow up that damn box.
I think you just changed it.
Drop the mic.
Yes.
Well put.
I absolutely love that. Well put, well put, well put. And yeah, if people, you know, Jongnic, I love that you ended it that way because it is absolutely true. And, you know, if people do start to feel like that or start to feel like, oh, am I going back into my just a checking the box kind of composer that's happening right now, then go to the Composers Diversity Collective and go to Real Change and then the Fund for Film Scoring and all these amazing composers that have also experienced that in their life or felt that way, because you have support, you have mentorship, and you have opportunities that are in front of you, and you have phenomenal composers like all of the ones here right in front of you today who are making sure that your voices are heard and are making sure that our art is continuing to be diverse and celebrated all over the world. So you all, like I said, I can talk to you for 5 more hours. I want to go into like, what is your artistic process? What inspired you? La, 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 because I love all of you. But that just means I'm going to have to call you all again sometime. And then we will hear Dara sing, because maybe we'll have content. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But I am fans of you all, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please, please, please check out our La Leaf Festival, check out the website, and please dive into each of these phenomenal composers' bios. The world is their oyster. They are George Shaw 2 decades, but it's like, he looks like a baby. Their lives, there's so much more amazing things ahead of all of us, right? You know, there's so much beautiful art, and it's just a matter of time before, you know, I'm going to call Tony and he's going to have 50 assistants that are like, oh, he's not available. So
Never.
and so we got him today. Okay. Yeah. We got all of them today. David, Dara, Tony, George, Jongnic, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, and for sharing a little bit about your life and all the wonderful things that you're doing to make this world a brighter place and sound even better with your phenomenal scores. Looking forward to more from all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Alexis.
Bye, everybody.